The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast bowl made of gleaming metal and crystal. Thousands of seats curved around the central speaking platform where the most important decisions in the galaxy were made. Today, those seats buzzed with excitement and anger. Ambassador Hyan sat in the human section, his hands folded quietly in his lap. He wore a simple dark suit, nothing fancy or decorated like the other ambassadors around him. His face showed no emotion as he listened to speaker after speaker stand up to complain about his people. The Zalathi ambassador was tall and thin, with blue skin that shimmered when she moved. She pointed one long finger toward the human section. "The humans are too aggressive in their business deals," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. "They always want to change our old ways of trading. They make things too complicated." A rumble of agreement came from many seats. The Morphic Collective's representative, a blob-like creature that changed colors as it spoke, pulsed bright red with anger. Humans spread their strange culture everywhere they go. They bring music and art and stories that confuse our young people. Our children ask questions about things that should not be questioned. More voices joined in. The Crystalline Empire complained that humans asked too many questions about their mining operations. The Gas Giant Federation said humans were always trying to improve their floating cities in ways that were not asked for. Hyan listened to it all without speaking. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Council for 12 years. In that time, he had seen humanity grow from a small member species to an important part of galactic life, but he had also seen the fear in other species' eyes when humans solved problems too quickly or came up with ideas that others had not thought of. Speaker Varric stood at the central platform. She was from the Avian Republic, covered in bright green feathers that rustled when she moved. She had been fair to humanity in the past, but today her golden eyes looked sad and tired. "The motion before us today," Varric announced, "is to remove humanity from the Galactic Council and revoke their membership in our alliance. This is not a decision we make lightly." The insectoid hive's representative clicked and buzzed in their strange language. The translation device made their words clear. Humans are too different. They think differently, they act differently. They do not fit with the rest of us. A delegate from the aquatic worlds added, "They are always rushing to fix things that are not broken. They make us feel slow." Hyan almost smiled at that. Humans did tend to move fast compared to many galactic species. Where others might spend decades discussing a problem, humans would often just start working on solutions right away. The debate went on for hours. Some species defended humanity. The Trading Guild mentioned how much easier commerce had become since humans joined. The Medical Alliance talked about the new treatments humans had shared freely. But these voices were few and quiet. Finally, Varric called for order. "We will now vote on Resolution 2847, the removal of humanity from the Galactic Council and termination of their alliance membership." The voting began. Each species announced their choice. Hyan watched the tally appear on the great display above the platform. The numbers climbed steadily in favor of expulsion. When the count finished, the hall fell silent. 847 votes for removal, 12 votes against. Humanity had chosen not to vote on their own expulsion, as was traditional. Varric looked directly at Hyan. "Ambassador, the Council has spoken. Humanity has 30 standard days to complete withdrawal from all Council territories and installations." Hyan stood up slowly. Around him, thousands of alien eyes watched to see how the human would react. Would he shout? Would he threaten? Would he beg for another chance? Instead, Hyan picked up his briefcase and nodded once to Speaker Varric. "We understand the Council's decision," he said in a calm, clear voice that carried through the silent hall. "Humanity will begin withdrawal procedures immediately. We thank the Council for the years of cooperation we have shared." He turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the complete silence. No other human delegates followed him because there were no other human delegates. Humanity had always sent just one representative, believing that one voice, speaking honestly, was better than many voices arguing. As Hyan reached the great doors, he paused and turned back. "We wish the Council success in all their future endeavors," he said. Then he walked out. The hall erupted into confused chatter. This was not how expelled species usually behaved. Where was the anger? Where were the threats of revenge? Where were the desperate promises to change? Delegate Crix from the Mineral Coalition whispered to his neighbor. That was unexpected. Speaker Varix banged her gavel for order, but she looked troubled. In all her years leading the council, she had never seen such a calm reaction to expulsion. Meanwhile, in a small communication room near the council chambers, Hyun activated his quantum relay. The signal would take several minutes to reach Earth, but it would arrive with perfect clarity. President Mina appeared on the screen, sitting in her office in Seoul. Behind her, the lights of the city sparkled in the evening darkness. "How did it go?" she asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. 47-12, Hyun reported. "They want us gone in 30 days. Mina nodded slowly. She had expected this outcome for months. The signs had been there in the way other species looked at humans during meetings, in the whispered conversations that stopped when humans entered a room, in the growing list of complaints about human efficiency and innovation. "Any conditions? Any demands?" Mina asked. "None. They just want us to leave." Mina was quiet for a moment, looking out at her city. Somewhere down there, millions of humans were living their lives, unaware that their species had just been kicked out of galactic civilization. But they would adapt. Humans always adapted. "Send the recall order to all installations," she finally said. "Operation Silent Departure begins now." Hyun nodded. "What about our treaties? Our trade agreements? Our research partnerships?" "Honor them all until the last day," Mina replied. "We leave as we came, with dignity." The transmission ended, and Hyun sat alone in the small room. Outside, he could hear the continuing debates in the council chamber as species argued about what humanity's calm reaction meant. They would understand soon enough. But by then, it would be too late. The evacuation ships arrived at human installations across the galaxy like clockwork. No fanfare, no dramatic announcements. They simply appeared, loaded up, and departed again. The efficiency was so smooth that many alien observers almost missed it happening. On the industrial world of Titan 7, factory supervisor Minho was training his replacement when the evacuation order came through. His replacement was a crystalline being named Zandek, who had worked under human management for 8 years. "I do not understand your manufacturing processes," Zandek admitted, his crystal body flickering with nervous energy. "The efficiency rates you achieve should be impossible with this equipment." Minho walked Zandek through the factory floor one more time. The machines hummed quietly, producing electronic components that supplied half the galaxy's consumer goods market. "The secret is not in the machines," Minho explained. "It is in how you organize the workflow. See how we arrange the assembly stations? Each worker can help the next one if there is a problem. But the manual says to keep each station separate," Zandek said, confused. "The manual was written by people who never worked in a factory," Minho replied with a small smile. "We changed it to what actually works." This was happening everywhere. Humans had not just followed the official procedures, they had quietly improved them. They had found better ways to do almost everything, then implemented those improvements without making a big deal about it. In the Outer Rim, mining coordinator Suji was explaining her scheduling system to a group of aquatic supervisors. The asteroid mining operation she managed had tripled its output in the 5 years since humans took over operations. "How do you predict which asteroids will have the highest mineral content?" asked Gloob, his water-filled breathing helmet bubbling as he spoke. "We map the asteroid field's formation history," Suji explained, pointing to charts on her office wall. "Asteroids that formed in certain stellar conditions are more likely to contain rare metals. It is basic geology." The aquatic supervisors looked at each other in confusion. Their species had been mining asteroids for thousands of years, but they had always just selected targets randomly or based on size. The idea of using scientific prediction had never occurred to them. "Will you leave these prediction models for us?" another supervisor asked hopefully. Suji was already copying files to a data crystal. Everything is here. The geological surveys, the formation models, the probability calculations. You will do fine. But as she handed over the crystal, Suji knew they probably would not do fine. The information was all there, but information was not the same as understanding. It had taken her team years to develop the intuition needed to read the data correctly. On the Medical Research Station, New Geneva, Dr. Yuna was facing a similar problem. She had spent 12 years developing new surgical techniques that had saved thousands of alien lives. Now she was trying to explain those techniques to doctors who had never seen them before. The key is in the timing, she explained to a group of insectoid surgeons. You must make the first incision exactly 2.3 seconds after the anesthetic takes effect. Too early and the patient will feel pain. Too late and the tissue begins to heal itself. The insectoid doctors clicked and buzzed among themselves. Their translation devices struggled with the concept. How do you measure such precise timing, one asked. Practice, Yuna replied. Lots and lots of practice. She demonstrated the technique one more time on a training simulator. Her hands moved, with practiced precision, each cut perfectly timed and placed. The alien doctors watched carefully, but she could see the doubt in their compound eyes. They were thinking about rules and procedures, not about the subtle art of surgery. Across the galaxy, human transport ships continued their quiet work. Unlike the evacuation fleets of other species, which usually involved military escorts and defensive formations, the human ships traveled alone or in small groups. They had no weapons beyond basic defensive systems. They needed no escorts because they had made no enemies. Captain Jiwan commanded one of the evacuation fleets leaving the core worlds. Her small convoy of 6 ships carried nearly 10,000 humans and their families. As they passed through the heavily traveled shipping lanes near the galactic center, alien vessels moved aside to let them pass. Captain, her communications officer reported, we are receiving a transmission from the Hegemony flagship Dominance. The Hegemony was one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. Their ships were massive and heavily armed, designed to project fear and strength. Jiwan had met their admiral, a proud being named Vraxis, at several diplomatic functions. Put him through, Jiwan said. Admiral Vraxis appeared on the screen, his reptilian features scarred from ancient battles. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship bustled with activity. Captain Jiwan, he said in his deep, rumbling voice, I heard about the Council's decision. This is unfortunate. Thank you for your concern, Admiral, Jiwan replied politely. Where will your people go now? Vraxis asked. The Hegemony has many worlds that could use human expertise. We would welcome you as allies. Jiwan appreciated the offer, but she shook her head. Humanity will find its own path. But thank you. After the transmission ended, Jiwan's second officer asked, should we have considered his offer? The Hegemony is powerful. They could protect us. From what? Jiwan asked. We are not at war with anyone. We need no protection. This was another thing that confused alien observers. Humans were leaving the galaxy's most powerful alliance, but they showed no fear. They were not looking for new protectors or rushing to join other military groups. They were simply leaving, as if they had somewhere better to go. On the agricultural world of Greenhaven, farmer Dongmin was harvesting his last crop. The grain he grew fed 12 different worlds in this sector. His farming techniques had increased crop yields by 400% over the past decade. His workers, mostly peaceful herbivore species, watched sadly as he prepared to leave. What will happen to the farms? Asked Pelix, whose people had worked alongside humans for generations. You will run them, Dongmin said simply. I have left detailed guides for crop rotation, soil management, and pest control. You know these fields better than I do. But we do not know your magic, Pelix protested. We do not know how you make plants grow so well. Dongmin laughed gently. There is no magic, just careful observation and hard work. Watch the soil. Listen to the plants. They will tell you what they need. As his transport ship lifted off from Green Haven, Dongmin looked down at the vast fields of grain swaying in the wind. Those fields would continue to feed millions of people long after he was gone. That was enough. The pattern repeated on every human world and station. Humans completed their work, trained their replacements, and departed without complaint. They left behind hospitals and schools, power plants and communication networks, farms and factories. Most importantly, they left behind knowledge. Not just data files and instruction manuals, but years of experience and wisdom built up through trial and error. The problem was that experience and wisdom could not be transferred as easily as a data crystal. Engineer Sohee discovered this when she tried to explain the fusion reactor maintenance procedures to her replacement on Kepler 442. The alien engineers were smart and capable, but they had never worked with human-designed systems. The reactor will run automatically for months, Sohee explained patiently. But you must watch for harmonic fluctuations in the containment field. When the frequency drops below 847 Hz, you need to adjust the magnetic confinement. How do we know when to make adjustments? The chief engineer asked. You feel it, Sohee said. The reactor will sound different. The vibration through the floor will change slightly. After a while, you will learn to notice. The alien engineers exchanged worried looks. They were used to following precise instructions and detailed procedures. The idea of making critical decisions based on intuition and experience made them nervous. But Sohee had no more time to train them. Her transport was leaving in 6 hours, and she still had personal belongings to pack. She gathered her tools, her photos, and the small plant she had grown in her quarters. Everything else stayed behind. As her ship lifted off from Kepler 442, Sohee looked back at the power plant she had managed for 7 years, the reactor that had never failed under her care, the efficiency improvements that had reduced energy costs for the entire planet. She wondered how long it would take for problems to start appearing. But that was no longer her concern. She had done her job as well as she could. And now, it was time to move on. The evacuation continued with the same quiet efficiency that had characterized humanity's presence in galactic civilization. No delays, no excuses, no second thoughts. By the end of the first week, half of all human installations had been evacuated. By the end of the second week, only a few remote outposts remained active. The aliens watching this exodus could not help but be impressed by the organization and discipline involved. But they were also beginning to feel uneasy. The humans were leaving too easily, too willingly. It was almost as if they had been planning for this moment all along. 3 months after the last human transport ship disappeared beyond the galactic rim, Trade Coordinator Zefix stared at the economic reports with growing alarm. The numbers made no sense. Galactic trade volume had dropped by 40%. Supply, chains that had operated smoothly for decades were falling apart. Shipping costs had doubled and delivery times had tripled. Worst of all, nobody seemed to understand why. Zefix called an emergency meeting with the sector trade managers. Representatives from 12 different species gathered in the conference room, their faces showing confusion and worry. Can someone explain to me? Zefix began, his tentacles writhing with frustration. Why it now takes 6 weeks to ship grain from the agricultural worlds to the core systems. It used to take 10 days. The managers looked at each other nervously. Finally, Blex from the shipping guild spoke up. The humans used to handle most of the route optimization. They had these computer programs that calculated the most efficient paths between systems. So use the programs, Zefix snapped. We tried, Blex replied miserably. But the programs are written in human mathematical concepts. We cannot understand how they work. Zefix felt a cold fear settling in his stomach. What about the backup systems? The old routing methods we used before humans joined the council? Those systems cannot handle current trade volumes, another manager admitted. Commerce has grown. Too complex. We need the human optimization programs, but without humans to run them. The meeting continued for hours, but no solutions emerged. The aliens were discovering that humans had not just participated in galactic trade, they had quietly become the backbone of the entire system. On Proxima 7th, The research station that Dr. Kyungmin had left behind was facing its own crisis. The xenobiology team had been trying to continue her disease research for 3 months without success. Dr. Kwirek stared at the data files that Kyungmin had left behind. The information was all there: detailed notes, experimental procedures, test results. But none of it made sense without the human way of thinking that had created it. She mentions looking for unusual patterns in the genetic sequences, Kwirek said to his research team. But she does not define what makes a pattern unusual. His colleague, a morphic scientist named Blorix, shifted colors from blue to purple, in frustration. Human minds work differently than ours. They see connections that we do not see. They ask questions that we do not think to ask. The research team had tried to follow Kyungmin's procedures exactly, but every experiment failed. The disease samples they were studying continued to resist all treatment attempts. Meanwhile, reports came in of new outbreaks on 3 different worlds. Perhaps we should contact the humans directly, suggested another team member. Ask for Dr. Kyungmin's help. Quirex had already tried that. The official response from the human commonwealth was polite but firm. Dr. Kyungmin is no longer available for consultation on council-related matters. We wish you success in your research. Worse problems were erupting across the galaxy. 17 different worlds, conflicts were breaking out between species that had lived in peace for decades. The border dispute between the Mineral Coalition and the Gas Giant Federation was the first to turn violent. Both sides claimed mining rights to a small asteroid field that contained rare crystals. Under normal circumstances, the conflict would have been resolved through council mediation, but the human diplomatic corps was gone. Ambassador Taehyun, who had prevented this exact conflict 2 years earlier, was now somewhere beyond the galactic rim. The mediation protocols he had developed were written down, but following written procedures was not the same as understanding how to apply them. Negotiator. Vilek from the Crystalline Empire tried to use Taehyun's mediation techniques, but the talks collapsed within hours. The humans had a way of making both sides feel heard, Vilek reported to the council. I do not possess this skill. The fighting spread quickly. Other species took sides based on old alliances and ancient grudges. Trade routes became unsafe, as military ships patrolled disputed areas. Speaker Varix called emergency sessions day after day, but the council seemed unable to function without human input. For years, humans had served on dozens of committees and working groups. They had written reports, suggested compromises, and found creative solutions to complex problems. Now those committee meetings dragged on for days without reaching any conclusions. Problems that humans would have solved in hours remained unsolved for weeks. The Morphic Collective was dealing with their own crisis. Their youth had become fascinated with human culture during the years of contact. Human music, art, and literature had spread throughout Morphic society, encouraging young Morphics to ask questions about their rigid social structure. Elder Shapron tried to ban all human cultural influences, but it was too late. Young Morphics had already learned to think in new ways. They questioned traditions that had never been questioned before. They wanted to explore and create instead of simply following the patterns their elders had established. The damage is done, Shapron complained to the council. Human ideas have infected our youth. They no longer accept our guidance without asking why. But removing human influence proved impossible. Human cultural exports had become part of daily life for billions of aliens across the galaxy. Music that helped workers focus. Stories that taught children about friendship and courage. Art that made people think about their place in the universe. Taking all of that away left a strange emptiness that nobody had expected. The economic problems were getting worse. Banking systems that humans had helped design were failing because nobody understood the algorithms they had created. Communication networks were breaking down because human technicians had been the ones who knew how to fix the complex routing protocols. On the trading hub of New Mumbai Station, alien merchants were learning the hard way how much they had depended on human brokers. Merchant Prince Quello had lost half his fortune when a deal fell through because of miscommunication between species. The humans always knew how to translate between different business cultures, Quello explained to his advisors. They understood what each species really wanted, not just what they said they wanted. His chief advisor, a logical synthetic being, processed this information. Perhaps we should study human negotiation techniques. With what teachers? Quello asked bitterly. The humans are gone. On the frontier world of New Harmony, the situation was becoming desperate. Commander Jiho's peacekeeping forces had been replaced by local militia, but the locals were not trained for the complex security challenges they now faced. Mayor Bowen stood in his office looking at reports of increasing crime and unrest. Pirate. Raids were becoming more frequent. Disputes between settlements were escalating into violence. The communication systems that had kept the peace were failing without human maintenance. Send another message to the human commonwealth, Bowen ordered, his communications officer. Tell them we need help. Tell them we will pay any price. The reply came back within hours. The Commonwealth appreciates your message but cannot provide assistance in Council territory. We wish you peace and prosperity. Bowen threw the message tablet across the room in frustration. Peace and prosperity. Those were exactly what New Harmony was losing without human presence. Back on Earth, President Mina was receiving similar requests from across the galaxy. Desperate pleas for help, offers of massive payments, promises of special treatment if humans would just return and fix the growing problems. Her aide Jinho brought her the latest batch of messages. 73 requests today, he reported, including one from Speaker Varix herself. Mina read Varix's message carefully. It was formal and polite, but she could sense the desperation underneath. The speaker was asking if humanity would consider consulting agreements that would allow human experts to help solve specific problems without actually rejoining the council. What should I tell them? Jinho asked. The same thing we have told everyone else, Mina replied. Humanity is moving forward with its own plans. We cannot provide assistance to council territories. Jinho hesitated. Madam President, some of these requests are about life and death situations. The medical crisis on Zelathi Prime could kill millions of people. Mina felt the weight of that responsibility, but her expression remained firm. The council made its choice. They wanted us gone, and we respected that choice. We cannot help people who have rejected our help. This was perhaps the hardest part of the withdrawal for many humans. They had spent centuries building relationships and helping solve problems across the galaxy. Walking away from people in need went against every human instinct. But it was necessary. The council had to learn to stand on its own, to understand what they had lost before they could appreciate what they had rejected. Meanwhile, human scout ships were exploring new regions beyond the galactic rim. Captain Hayek commanded one such vessel, mapping systems that no council species had ever visited. What they found was promising. Uninhabited worlds with good resources, peaceful space that could become a new home for humanity. Sir, his science. Officer reported, the fourth planet in this system shows signs of ancient civilization, ruins but no current inhabitants. Hyok studied the readings. Any signs of what happened to them? 6 months after humanity's departure, the Morphic Collective's home system was dying. The plague had started small, just a few sick individuals in the outer colonies. But without the medical protocols that Dr. Kyungmin had developed, the disease spread like wildfire through their liquid-based biology. Elder Shapron stood in the emergency medical center on Morphia Prime, watching as his people suffered. The irony was bitter and complete. In Dr. Kyungmin's abandoned research files, they had found the exact cure for this plague. The human scientist had identified the disease pattern 3 years ago and developed a treatment protocol. But the cure required precise timing and careful dosage calculations that the morphic doctors could not master. Dr. Kyungmin had possessed an intuitive understanding of how different species biologies interacted with synthetic compounds. Without that understanding, every attempt to use her cure resulted in failure or worse reactions. We must contact the humans directly, Shapron's medical advisor urged. Beg them to help us. Shapron had already tried. 3 different messages to the human commonwealth, each more desperate than the last. Each had received the same polite response. The Commonwealth cannot provide medical assistance in Council territory. We recommend consulting with Council medical authorities. The death toll was rising daily. Chaperon's own body was showing early signs of infection, dark patches spreading across his normally silver surface. His people were dying because of his pride, because he had voted to expel the very beings who could save them. Meanwhile, trade wars had erupted between three major galactic alliances. The Commercial Federation, the Independent Traders Union, and the Cooperative Markets had all been held together by carefully negotiated agreements that humans had drafted. Without human mediator Tae-hyun to maintain those delicate balances, old resentments had surfaced. Each alliance accused the others of unfair trade practices. Tariffs were imposed. Trade routes were blocked. Economic warfare was spreading across multiple sectors. Ambassador Kelvex of the Commercial Federation tried to reconstruct Tae-hyun's negotiation methods from recorded sessions. He studied hours of footage showing the human diplomat in action, trying to understand how he had made such complex deals work. He never raises his voice, Kelvex observed to his staff. He listens more than he speaks. When others become angry, he becomes calmer. Perhaps these are human genetic traits, suggested his advisor. No, Kelvex replied, watching Tae-hyun diffuse a heated argument with a simple question that reframed the entire dispute. This is learned skill, but how do we learn it without teachers? The answer was becoming clear. They could not. Human diplomatic techniques relied on understanding psychology and motivation in ways that other species found difficult to grasp. Humans seemed to instinctively know what drove other beings, what fears and hopes motivated their actions. Speaker Varix was facing the worst crisis of her long career. Council sessions had become shouting matches as species blamed each other for the growing problems. Without human voices to provide calm analysis and practical solutions, debates went in circles for days without resolution. The insectoid hive was demanding military action against the pirates raiding their colonies. The aquatic worlds wanted economic sanctions against the crystalline empire for trade violations. The gas giant Federation was threatening to withdraw from the council entirely if their territorial disputes were not resolved immediately. Order, Varix screeched, her feathers standing on end with stress. We must address these issues systematically. But there was no system anymore. The careful procedures that humans had helped develop over the years had broken down. Committee. Assignments were delayed because nobody could agree on fair representation. Fact-finding missions were stalled because different species could not work together effectively. Most frustrating of all, the Council kept receiving reports about humanity's new commonwealth. Scout ships brought back intelligence about human expansion beyond the galactic rim. They were not just surviving, they were thriving. The humans had established colonies on dozens of new worlds. They had made contact with 3 previously unknown species and formed peaceful relationships with all of them. Their economy was growing rapidly, apparently based on cooperation and mutual benefit rather than competition and control. How is this possible? Varix asked her intelligence chief. They have no military protection, no powerful allies, no established trade networks. They appear to be creating all of those things very quickly, came the reply. The new species they have contacted are voluntarily joining their commonwealth. No conquest, no coercion, just invitation. This was perhaps the most disturbing news of all. Humanity was not struggling in exile. They were building something new and successful, while the galaxy they had left behind fell apart. On New Harmony, the situation had become critical. Mayor Bowen stood in the ruins of what had once been the planet's main communication center. A pirate raid 3 days earlier had destroyed the equipment that connected the scattered settlements. Without the communication network, the settlements could not coordinate their defenses. Without coordination, they could not protect their supply convoys. Without protected supplies, the outer settlements were beginning to fail. We need to evacuate the frontier colonies, Security Chief Nex reported. His reptilian features were grim with exhaustion. We cannot protect them anymore. Bowen remembered when New Harmony had faced similar problems 30 years ago. Back then, Commander Jiho and her peacekeeping forces had not just fought off the pirates. They had organized the settlements into a mutual defense network. They had trained local security forces in tactics that prevented raids rather than just responding to them. What about the defense protocols that Commander Jiho left behind? Bowen asked. We have tried to implement them, Nex replied, but they require coordination between settlements that we cannot maintain without the communication network, and the communication network requires technical knowledge that we do not possess. It was a terrible cycle. Every system depended on other systems, and humans had been the ones who understood how all the pieces fit together. Without them, the whole structure was collapsing. Bowen made the hardest decision of his career. Send evacuation ships to the outer settlements. We will consolidate the population in the core cities where we can still provide protection. As he gave the order, Bowen thought about the irony. New Harmony had been named for the peace that humans had brought to a troubled world. Now, without humans, that harmony was ending. Similar crises were developing across Council space. The asteroid mining operations that Coordinator Suji had optimized were running at 30% efficiency. The fusion reactors that Engineer Sohee had maintained were experiencing dangerous fluctuations. The agricultural systems that Farmer Dongmin had improved were producing smaller and smaller harvests. In each case, the aliens had the technical information they needed. But information was not the same as understanding. Humans had possessed an intuitive grasp of complex systems that other species struggled to replicate. Dr. Yuna's surgical techniques had been recorded in detail, but alien surgeons could not master the precise timing required. Hundreds of patients who would have survived under human care were dying on operating tables across the galaxy. Trade Coordinator Zephix finally broke down during a council emergency session. We made a mistake, he announced to the assembled delegates. The humans were not disrupting our systems, they were holding our systems together. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. For months, everyone had been thinking the same thing, but nobody had been willing to say it out loud. The Zalathi ambassador, who had been one of humanity's harshest critics, spoke up hesitantly. Perhaps we could invite them back. Offer them a special status within the council. They will not come, Speaker Varix replied sadly. I have already tried. 3 separate offers of partnership, each more generous than the last. Their response is always the same: polite thanks and firm refusal. The Morphic Collective's new representative, Elder Blorix, shifted colors nervously. What if we offered them complete autonomy? No council oversight of their activities? I tried that too, Varix said. They said humanity has found a better path forward. The council members looked at each other with growing desperation. They were facing the possibility that they had lost humanity forever, not through war or conquest, but through their own foolish decision. Intelligence reports continued to arrive about the human commonwealth. They had established a major colony in the Andromeda staging area, a region of space that the council had always considered too dangerous to explore. They were trading peacefully with species that the council had never even heard of. Most disturbing of all, some council member species were beginning to ask questions about joining the Commonwealth instead. The Trading Guild had lost 17 member organizations to human recruitment in the past month. When council investigators tried to learn how humans were attracting these new allies, the answer was simple: they offered partnership instead of membership. Species who joined the Commonwealth kept their independence and their own governments. They worked together because they wanted to, not because they were forced to. It was a completely different approach to galactic civilization. 1 year after humanity's expulsion, the Galactic Council was falling apart. 3 major species had withdrawn their membership entirely. 12 others had reduced their participation to minimal levels. The Great Alliance that had maintained peace across the galaxy for over 1,000 years was crumbling. Speaker Varix stood before what remained of the council assembly. Where thousands of delegates had once gathered, now only a few hundred seats were filled. The magnificent chamber felt empty and cold. We face an unprecedented crisis, Varix announced. her green feathers dull with stress and exhaustion. Our trade networks have collapsed. Our diplomatic systems have failed. Our member species are abandoning us for other alliances. She did not need to mention which alliance they were joining. Everyone knew. The human commonwealth had grown from nothing to the galaxy's most successful cooperative in just 12 months. The Zalathi ambassador raised one thin blue hand. Perhaps it is time to admit our error. We expelled humanity based on fear and prejudice, not on facts or justice. Murmurs of agreement came from around the chamber. The evidence was overwhelming. Every problem the council faced could be traced back to the loss of human expertise. Every success story they heard from outside council space seemed to involve human participation. The Commonwealth now includes 47 species, reported Intelligence Chief Norax. 17 of them are former council members. They report higher satisfaction, better economic growth, and more effective problem-solving than they experienced under our system. The numbers were devastating. The Commonwealth was not just surviving, it was proving that there was a better way to organize interstellar civilization. Varix made the decision that should have been made months earlier. I will personally travel to the Commonwealth headquarters and request a meeting with President Mina. It is time to ask for humanity's forgiveness. The journey to the Andromeda staging area took Varix's diplomatic ship 2 weeks. As they approached the coordinates provided by Commonwealth Navigation Services, Varix was amazed by what she saw. The human headquarters was not a massive military station or a gleaming palace of power. It was a simple but elegant structure built around a rotating habitat ring. Ships from dozens of species docked at its ports in peaceful order. The whole installation hummed with quiet efficiency. Commonwealth Control, this is Galactic Council Ship Harmony's wing requesting permission to dock. Varix's pilot transmitted. Permission granted, Harmony's wing. Please proceed to Diplomatic Berth 7. President Mina is expecting you. The DIA. Ease of the response surprised Varix. No security challenges, no demands for identification, no bureaucratic delays. They were simply welcomed and directed to the appropriate dock. President Mina met Varix at the airlock personally. She wore a simple business suit and was accompanied by only 2 aides, Admiral Sunho and Chief Diplomat Jion. No guards, no ceremony, no display of power. Speaker Varix, Mina said, offering a polite bow. Welcome to Commonwealth Station. I hope your journey was comfortable. Varix was struck by how calm Mina appeared. The human president showed no anger or bitterness, despite everything the council had done to her people. President Mina, I have come to apologize for the council's actions and to discuss the possibility of renewed cooperation. I appreciate that, Mina replied. Please let us talk in my office. The office was modest and practical, with large windows showing the star field beyond the station. Earth artwork decorated the walls, paintings of mountains and forests that reminded Varix how beautiful the human homeworld had been. The council has realized its mistake, Varix began carefully. We expelled humanity based on fear and misunderstanding. We see now that humans were not the cause of our problems, but the solution to many problems we did not even recognize. Mina listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful but unreadable. We would like to invite humanity to return to the council, Varix continued, with full membership and a permanent seat on the leadership council. We would guarantee that humans could never be expelled again. That is generous, Mina said quietly. But I must ask, what has changed? A year ago, the council voted 847 to 12 that humanity was too different, too disruptive, too dangerous to remain in your alliance. Have we become less different? Varix felt her feathers droop with embarrassment. We have learned that different does not mean wrong. That disruption of bad systems is actually good. That what we saw as dangerous was actually helpful. And if we return, Mina asked, and if we continue to suggest improvements and ask difficult questions and solve problems in our own way, what guarantee do we have that the council will not vote us out again when times are good, and our help is not urgently needed? Varix had no answer for that question. The council's decision to expel humanity had been based on emotion and prejudice, not logic. Those same emotions and prejudices still existed among many member species. Mina stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful activity around the station. "We have built something different here," she said. "A society based on contribution rather than politics, on solving problems rather than assigning blame, on cooperation rather than control." She turned back to face Varix. "Our Commonwealth partners work with us because they want to, not because they have to. When someone has a problem, we help if we can. When someone has an idea, we listen and consider it. When someone makes a mistake, we work together to fix it instead of punishing them." Admiral Sunho spoke for the first time. "We have 47 member species now. None of them has ever voted to expel another member. We do not operate by majority, rule over minority rights." Chief Diplomat Jion added, "Each species maintains complete independence. We share resources and knowledge freely. We defend each other when necessary. But no one is forced to participate in anything they do not support." Varix listened to these descriptions with growing understanding. The humans had not just left the council, they had created something better to replace it. What would it take, Varix asked desperately, for humanity to consider helping the council with our current crises? Not membership, just assistance. We could pay any price you name. Mina returned to her seat and looked directly at Varix. "The Commonwealth does not work for hire. We help our partners, because they are our partners. We cannot help the council, because the council chose not to be our partner." "But people are dying," Varix protested. "The plague on Morphia Prime, the conflicts on New Harmony, the economic collapse affecting billions of beings. Surely humanity's compassion." "Our compassion is exactly why we cannot help," Mina interrupted gently. "If we rescue the council from the consequences of their decision, they will never learn from their mistake. They will continue to make the same errors, hurt the same people, repeat the same cycles of prejudice and fear." The logic was unassailable, but it was also heartbreaking. Varix realized that she was not just asking for help. She was asking,